Behind me is the piece I've been working on filming the process video for. I've been working on this piece since May of 2024. It was I don't remember how I first conceptualized it, but it was I had gotten several sort of pieces of donated fabric from tight knit groups, sort of events at their last group exhibition for Fiber Friday, where they were different members had donated their whatever fabric they didn't want, and I had gotten these really nice kind of like lacy doilies. I don't think they're doilies. They're not doilies. I think they're placemats. But they have these nice kind of like lace edges, and I had also gotten this patterned fabric that was pink and blue and had like these flowers and buttons and I don't know, these kind of like almost domestic sort of scenes on it, and I hadn't quite figured out how I was going to use them or put them together. And I started thinking about the issues, current events, the genocide in Palestine, and wanting to make an artwork about that, but not feeling that any typical or particular method was adequate. And so I started taking it upon myself to hand sew all of these different components together, just with thread I had. And then I ended up buying this pink lace that is the trimming around the edge, which, like I said, is all hand sewn. And a lot of the goal for me was just to take my time making a work about this really. There's not really a single word that you can use to sum up a genocide, but important, I suppose, this really important topic, because I make a lot of my work really quickly, not intentionally, but I'm just a fast painter. And I was like, so what if I spent a really long, really dedicated my time to making this surface to kind of, represent and spend my personal time considering the plights of these people and, the lives that are continuing to be lost. Just really, reminding myself that the goal here is not to do anything as fast as possible, but to, take time to think about these issues. And of course, I'm not just sitting there in silence sewing, but even then, still, it, you get the reminders, and while you're living your everyday life, it kind of clicks back in, like, this is something that that is ongoing and something to be considered. I guess before I started making the surface, I had started collecting various photos, not very many because I landed on the ones I wanted to depict pretty quickly, of different things happening for displaced people in Palestine. And as many people do, I follow Bisan Auda, and she does a really effective job at documenting an array of different experiences. And in one of her videos, she was filming the shore of Gaza Strip and talking about how much she missed the shore and of Gaza City, I believe, and how she longed to return there. And apart from that desire for a really beautiful place that represented a simpler time, or not a simpler time, but a time that wasn't full of displacement. It's isolated on its own. It's sort of a beautiful scene. I mean, there are beaches all over the world, there are shores all over the world, and so looking at a shore without hurt in it gives you this immediately sort of picturesque there's lots of landscape painting. It's a lot of idealized sort of view of the landscape, and has a lot of colonial history, since it does tend to be white people, and especially white men, who are landscape painters, and kind of projecting their own hyper idealized naturalistic, or not naturalistic, but sort of wilderness view onto the landscape, where it's barren and it's untouched, and all these sorts of things, when it's not untouched by people. There just aren't indigenous people there because genocide, or even specific places where there wouldn't necessarily be indigenous groups of people. There's still that history there. I mean, lots of people say the land bears its history, and so that was something I was thinking about when I was choosing the image of the shore to represent this. As I'm talking about this, I'm kind of further actualizing some ideas that I've had, because it's hard to really, outside of an academic environment where you're always talking about your work, it becomes more difficult to adequately conceptualize the work that you're making. And you want to make it, but it's harder to figure out why. But yeah, so I was thinking about particularly this sort of decontextualized perspective of the land, and so it is a thing of beauty, for certain, and represents beauty for the Palestinian people, but then there's also this other side of this picture is far away because she can't get any closer, and she can't be there because of the occupation, and so it's I don't the last thing I want with this piece is to come off as if I don't know, as if I'm, again, I talked about this with my thesis. Obviously, I'm laying, bare my personal thoughts and opinions, but I don't want it to be as if I'm using myself to overshadow these people's experience, because obviously that's the most important thing here. And I think when I was sewing it, it was a lot harder to sort of articulate what I wanted, because I was using this really pretty fabric, and I feel like domesticity, these sort of domestic scenes, are a lot of the times associated with whiteness, because they relate to the idealized picture of a woman, and that idealized picture is a white woman. And obviously I'm not a white woman, but I didn't want it to be that, I don't know, this very like colonial picture of something good is what I'm portraying. I think I, I want this piece to be really multifaceted, and I think that's one of the reasons I um, obviously took my time with it, but also uh, used these, this sort of associated quilting method with it, because it is, kind of quilted. And I think, well, I don't think that, I know that quilting has a very strong history with Black women, and so, there's something there as well. Um, but to kind of return to uh, the piece itself, yeah, so I had decided that I wanted to paint the shore of Gaza from, a Palestinian person's perspective, not me embodying their perspective, but literally the image was taken by a Palestinian person. And it's a thing of beauty. It's important for the Palestinian people. It is beautiful to the Palestinian people. It represents the beauty of Palestine, but it also, within that context, has that colonial lens of, the desirability to settle in this place because of its, beauty and paradise. And, just think of like tourism and, all these places that people like to go because they're beautiful. Hawaii, for example, um, when it's like, it's not just beautiful, it's like it's got a history and people live here, and there's animals and there's environment and there's these interspecies relationships, and there's so much more than this perception of paradise. And so this piece is two-sided, and on the other side, which I haven't painted yet, because like I said, I've been working on this for a really long time. There, again, taken from Bisan, is from a video that she had made. She's holding a bullet casing, and the caption of the video, she's talking in the video, I think, but there's a caption, like text, on the actual video that says that the bullet casing she's holding shot a child from a quadcopter. And so, it's not just this beautiful thing, there's also so much death and violence and hatred and senselessness happening in this beautiful place because of this colonial lens that is, trying to remove the relationship of the people and culture and those interspecies relationships from it. So that was kind of, that's the other side of the piece. In some ways, to me, the stitches represent some of the lives lost in Gaza, but it became kind of difficult to count them because of the sewing method that I used. So it's hard to, decipher whether one stitch is really two stitches and, things like that. And there's also certainly not, it's tens of thousands of people, even potentially over, 100,000 people who have died due to genocide, and that's not really something, you see videos of people counting grains of rice, and it's these big, jars full of rice that are representing the number of lives lost, and it's pretty, it feels kind of impossible to adequately represent a life lost. I mean, I think those videos do a decent job of showing the magnitude, but you know, even there's a video I saw that's like 10 minutes that's just a um like credits style rolling clip of just people's names who have died and been murdered. And um it's just like even a name is not enough. It's entire lives. It's things that we can never know about these people, and so it becomes really difficult to um, have any sort of sound representation. And even though I do a lot of portraiture, that's one of the reasons I didn't. Um, because again, it's like it's so many thousands of people, and there's not really an adequate way to visualize that or contextualize that, um, other than just like following along and keeping current with the things that are happening. Um, and I think, lots of people try different things, and there's nothing wrong with those methods, but I just think that for me, as an artist who is really trying to do my best to give or represent um, represent complexity that portrait can sometimes just be not enough, um, because I mean, in this context, you're talking about literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Um, and also, a lot of these portraits, I mean, portraiture has become a really common method at this time to sort of try to humanize these people, to get, donations and, set up GoFundMe's and hear their plights. Um, and, I think that that's a very sort of specific methodology that is not currently one that I'm conducting. I mean, I think that like I may, choose a GoFundMe or family or something to share with this as I share this project, so that it can have something close to some actionable change, um, and not just the sort of conceptual values that I've been talking about. But I feel that um, that uncertainty in the strength of our methods, uh, and I felt that with this project a lot. Just because of, you know, how can you represent a magnitude? How can you represent a whole history? How can you do anything effectively, really? Uh, but like I said, it's and like I talk about in my thesis, it's a melding of my perspective and other perspectives to sort of gain, a wider sort of lens. And so, because I live in America where there is this context of colonial landscape painting, I think that that's a context that we can understand as um, connected to indigeneity and multifaceted and important, and also, having a relationship to indigenous peoples and, their, desire and perceived beauty, and again, the interspecies relationships and all these complicated elements that sort of factor into those paintings, or don't factor into those paintings, but factor into, that conversation. Um, so much to say here. I'm trying to figure out what else I want to say. I think I was going to say once I started painting, I gained a little bit more certainty, but that's not true. I think retrospectively, now that the piece is one color and it does, well, it's not one color, but it has the underpainting of that like red orange, that it doesn't feel as much like a weird, dainty kind of thing that it kind of felt like before. And as much as like it's like, oh, red is blood or whatever, it's not that. I chose orange. I tend to go with warmer colors when I'm working with underpaintings. I wanted something kind of intense underneath the relatively calm, out of context calm image of the shore to, kind of to give you something more there. I've also, you know, let the underpainting drip on the lace, and with the orange intentionally painted a strip of orange on the lace, which kind of, it changes its color, which I wanted to show the process there, also show the original color of the purple, because on top of the orange you can't see it. Yeah, I wanted something intense there, obviously with blue. Orange is a complementary color, so, that's kind of an easy relationship right off the bat. It's hard to kind of think of a better color for an underpainting on a blue, for blue painting than orange. If I wanted to evoke blood, I would have used alizarin crimson, which is what I did with my toilet painting, Period Blood. The background's alizarin crimson. You get it. But here I wanted intensity, I wanted the contrast, I wanted, hopefully, it to speak to multifacetedness and not just duality, because duality is far too simplistic for these kinds of issues. I hesitate to use the word complexity because there's been a lot of rhetoric about that language of like, oh, this is too complicated, I can't talk about it, and then people being like, it's really not that complicated, it's like there's a genocide, you need to speak out about it. And while I do agree with the it's direct in that way, but it's not, I don't feel that it's true that it's uncomplicated, because how can a whole history be uncomplicated? You know what I mean? It's like saying slavery is wrong is uncomplicated, or talking about slavery is uncomplicated. It's like, yes, obviously slavery is wrong. But there's an entire history there of like, this happened and this happened, and there are so many untold stories and so many hidden things, and all that kind of stuff, and legacies and dispersed people, and like I mentioned, those individual lives that can never be known, which in and of themselves are complex. So yeah, I hope. Hi. Hank has a lot to say these days. I hope that this piece speaks multifacetedly. It's kind of a difficult thing to spend a long time on, because it's like you hope that by the time I'm done with this piece, that the Israeli attacks will have stopped. But also, it's like it sometimes it feels like the end is never in sight, but also it has to be. Um, it's just like it's not possible to do it forever. Nothing is possible to do forever. Um, and so it's like, I don't want to take a long time on this because there is an urgency to the situation. There is an urgency. There's a necessity to speak now, produce now, um, but also the uh, the time it takes to properly mourn lost lives is not something that you can do with the speed and the urgency of now. Um, so, for me, making this piece represents the now because it's a current and consistent part of it's been a current and consistent part of my life for 7-8 months, and so it even in the times where you fail uh, to really pay attention and to really be present about these issues, um, which we all do. It's any sorts of fumbles are kind of unfortunately human. Um, this piece helps to bring me back, and so yeah, this will be the Gaza Shore, and on the other side, with an underpainting that I know not the color of, it will be that screenshot of bullet casing in hand with the caption. Um, I hope when installing this piece, I'd like it to be hanging like kind of in a large space because it's like 5 feet square. So that both sides can be seen because obviously on a wall you can only see one side, which is ineffective for this piece. Um, so yeah, I've taken a long time on it. I hope that it conveys the multifacetedness of the lives that were lost and the multifacetedness of the history of the Palestinian people, of the both the beauty seen by the Palestinian, or reflected to the outside world by the Palestinian people, but also there will inevitably be, colonial forces will see that beauty and try to claim it as their own. And so, you know, one of the reasons I talk about, I reference complexity is because when you know nothing about these issues, it is really confusing for someone to say that they're not complex because you know that there's information you don't know. And in order to kind of stop stuff like this, we need the most people possible, and inevitably that means that there will be people who are less or uneducated. And so conveying this multifacetedness without the punchy language of online activism is also something that's important to me. The text on the other side is not punchy, in my opinion. It's direct, it's true. And a lot of the times the punchy language is conveying something that's true, but in the in a way that it is designed for people who already understand to understand and not to convey to new people. So, like with a lot of my work, um, it's not not a priority with this work, but I think that this work maintains a level of accessibility with its double sides and its layering and its multifacetedness and its strange textures and um, all those kinds of things that will um, help people who don't understand be interested in understanding, because a lot of the times a lack of understanding comes from a place of fear and not hatred. Um, and so that's also something that I care about with every work, but particularly this work where we're addressing current events, that things need to be made accessible at least partially to people who don't understand, because we need the most people possible all of the time. Um, we can't stop things. Just one person, and even when one person does something effective, they still need the support of massive numbers of people. And so that multifacetedness conveyed in the surface and the texture and the image itself, the installation, all of these things, it's really important to me to kind of to make space for the people it's talking about, the history it's talking about, but also inevitably the people who view this largely won't be the people it's referencing. And so, that has to be a consideration that I'm making, that mostly Palestinian people won't be viewing this, I assume. Um, it's also, like anything, it's difficult to do, as I mentioned before, an adequate job of portraying, a history. And one of my one of my fears is that an actual, or not just one but several actual Palestinian people will be like, you did a bad job. And that's kind of something you just have to accept. I have to try, in spite of my fears, to convey that that this is important, and there's a history that needs to be documented. uh, Individuals, of course, need to be documented, but it's hard to, you cannot convey a history only by individuals. It also has to be documented through events and places and things like that. And so that's another reason why choosing an avenue other than portraiture is important to me. Just like all the protest signs I paint and draw and print are um it's always at some level a choice to document these things, that there was another perspective, if at any point it um, is tried, attempted to be erased. uh, I think I could maybe talk about this forever, just like most things I care about. So I'm going to end it here. Maybe I'll try to insert a picture of what this actually looks like, but right now it's mostly just a blue gradient. And I need to get more paint to actually finish the sky. Um, so I hope that this was something. I hope that maybe, this can be a reminder to people who feel burned out, that, or, it's hard to spend all your energy caring, because it's, you feel like uh, you're protecting yourself more by not caring, but ultimately that doesn't help you or anybody else. So I hope that this sort of reminds at least one person um, to return their energy in a concerted, multifaceted effort to speaking out and hopefully doing something, anything about, trying to help the Palestinian people, whether it's talking about it or sharing about it or donating to a GoFundMe, because there are so many, even like $2. It's anything helps. We need as many people as possible, and um, a, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you get the point. So I will leave it there. Goodbye.